What's up guys, Pedro here with Syzygy Coffee, and today we are going to talk about the French press. So the French press is a very controversial brewing method simply because of the fact that many people either hate it or love it because of the results they get at the end when they brew. And the reason being, or one of the most common reasons being, is people tend to get very dirty cups of coffee as well as very bitter coffee. So when I talk about very dirty coffee or dirty cup of coffee, it's whenever you drink some coffee and you have a bunch of little coffee grains in the very bottom of the cup. So that's when people start disliking the product, simply because when you start sipping it at the very end, you get that mushy, sort of sandy residue from the coffee. And the other reason, of course, is the bitterness. Now, I can tell you right off the bat is I love the coffee that comes out of the French press. It is a fantastic way to brew coffee if you do it right, and there are some tips and tricks for you to get a fantastic cup of coffee, very rich in flavor and very clean at the end of the brew cycle. And here I am going to show you how to do it. So let's start off by defining the French press. So there's two main categories to brewing coffee. Either it's percolation or infusion. So percolation is anything in which you have some coffee, ground coffee in this case, and you have some water, for example, a drip coffee maker. You add the water, the gravity is going to take care of passing that hot water through the coffee and then filter out and you get a cup of coffee. So the same is true with a Chemex, a V60, even an espresso machine, and a bunch of other brewing methods. Now in infusion, similarly to a tea, you would have the coffee interacting with the hot water for a period of time, and then you have to re-interact with that brewing method in order to get the coffee out. For the French press, it is an infusion because you added the coffee, add the water, and until you press down on the little lever and pour that coffee out, you're gonna just continue to extract coffee and caffeine from the ground coffee. So what you'll need for this tutorial is, of course, a French press, a gooseneck kettle, preferably with a thermometer, a scale to be able to accurately measure the amount of water and the amount of coffee. You'll also need some freshly roasted coarse ground coffee. So this is very important. You want very coarse coffee for this recipe. And also, if you have a timer or a phone that has a timer, that'd be fantastic as well. Now there's usually two options. Either you have all of these things already and you are watching this video to learn how to brew a coffee with the French press, or you're just simply interested in buying a French press. If that's the case, I've linked below some Amazon affiliate links for you to get all of the things that we use in this video, as well, of course, as our specialty coffee. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is start heating your water. Since we're going to be using 30 grams of coffee for this recipe, and we want to focus on a 1:15 ratio, you want to multiply 30 grams of coffee times 15 milliliters of water. You get a total of 400 milliliters of water. So you want to start heating up at least 450 milliliters of water in your gooseneck kettle. When I talk about 1:15 ratio, as some of you may already know, that means you have 15 milliliters of water for every single gram of coffee. You want to get the water temperature to around 89 degrees Celsius or 192 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take. And if you don't have a thermometer, then don't worry, simply heat up some water until it goes into a rolling boil and set it aside off of the heat once it starts boiling, and leave it there for around 2 minutes or so, and you should be good to go. Now we get into the coffee itself. As always, freshly ground coffee is the best, and in this scenario, we want to get freshly ground coffee that is coarse. So there are many reasons why you want the French press to use coarsely ground coffee. Number one, you want a slow extraction. This means that you want the water to interact with the coffee a certain number of minutes, usually between 3-4 minutes before you actually serve your coffee. And if you have very fine coffee, it's going to extract just too fast, and that's the reason why you usually get bitter coffee. Another reason is you want to be able to filter those coffee grounds whenever you serve it and whenever you press the top of the French press. It has a mesh in it, as you know. It looks like this. So even though it is very small in terms of aperture, coffee grounds can still get through. So the bigger the size of the coffee, the harder it is for it to come through instead of being pushed down. So that is very important. And finally, you want all the sediments from the coffee to settle to the very bottom. And that is another mistake. That's why people get dirty cups. Whenever they serve the French press, they usually have a fine grind, and that's when those little grinds start filtering out and going and create a very dirty cup of coffee. So you are pretty much set. You have your ground coarse coffee and you have your water heated up. Now, one thing I like to do, and I would recommend that you guys do as well, is heat up your French press. Remember, this thing is made out of glass, so if it's cold or you live in a cold apartment or in a cold environment, then that glass is also going to be cold. And if you have hot water coming in and causing a shock to the glass carafe, then it's gonna break. So my recommendation would be run it through warm tap water and it should be good to go. Afterwards, place it on top of the scale, zero it out, and add your coarse ground coffee. That's gonna tell you how many grams of coffee they're gonna be. As I mentioned before, for this recipe, we're using 30 grams of coffee. Zero out your scale again and add twice as much water as you have coffee. Since we're using 30 grams of coffee, you want to add 60 milliliters of water. This is what we call the bloom in that very first pour. So the bloom is a technique used to release the excess CO2. And the reason we do this is to prevent bitterness whenever you brew coffee. You'll see this technique being used mainly for pour over, but it's very useful for techniques that involve infusion, such as the French press, because the water is going to be staying there for a longer period of time. So be sure to bloom your coffee. Anyways, just add the 60 milliliters of water, stir around a little bit. I like to use the stirrer that comes with the AeroPress. It's very convenient and it's plastic. It's great. And then go ahead and start pouring the remainder of the water once 30 seconds or so have passed. So when you're adding the remainder of the water to the French press, make sure you do it slowly and in circles, go in and out like in a spiral and then back in. This way you'll make sure that all of the water is interacting with the coffee, and you want to create a little bit of turbulence just to get that good extraction. Now, you don't want to shake it or stir it very harshly. With the pouring motion with the gooseneck kettle, it's going to be enough. If you don't have a gooseneck kettle, just make sure to add it slowly, steady, and not create too much turbulence within the French press, just enough so that you cover all the ground coffee. So as soon as you're done pouring the remainder of the water into the French press, you're going to want to stir it very gently one last time, and then you'll notice that all the coffee is going to start settling to the bottom of the French press. And that's exactly what you want to happen. And you'll also notice that regardless of what you do and how much you stir it, there are some pieces that are going to stay afloat. What you want to do in that case is grab a couple of spoons and just scrape them out. And the reason I like to do this, even though it's not something that you need to do, is because whenever you start pouring that coffee after it has been brewing for a couple of minutes, those little pieces that are staying afloat are going to go directly to your cup of coffee, and it's going to make it look dirty. So once you are done scraping that little top layer of floating coffee bits, go ahead and put the lid on top and don't press it. Just don't touch it. Count 3 or 4 minutes, and this is more than enough time for a couple of things to happen. Infusion, in which you are brewing and extracting that coffee into the water, and you are going to allow the coffee to settle to the very bottom of the French press. So once 3 or 4 minutes have gone by, your coffee should have settled to the very bottom. If you look at your French press, you'll see a bunch of coffee clumped up in the bottom. You'll have your brewed coffee on top, and you'll have your little mesh at the very top. Now, it's very important that you don't shake your French press or move it abruptly, because all that's going to do is make those little bits of coffee start floating around again. You don't want that at all. So my recommendation is, as soon as you want to plunge this, don't press it to the very bottom. Just lightly press it on the top and then pour it immediately. Either pour it to the cup you're going to use to drink, or pour it to another container that you're going to use to serve to various people. The reason this is very, very, very important is, as I mentioned before, this is an infusion brewer. That means that every single second that the coffee is here, it's interacting with the water and it's extracting. So there's a point in which you no longer are extracting coffee and its wonderful flavors. You start increasing the extraction of bitterness. And that, as you know, is something that you don't want in coffee. And what you are left with is a fantastic cup of coffee, very rich, very bold, very flavorful. And if you do things right, it's going to be very, very clear. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be as clear as, say, a Chemex, but it is very, very nice to have a cup of coffee without little pieces of ground coffee within it, and this is the way to do it. Now, it takes some practice, simply because your brewing method, the coffee you use, the temperature of the water, the size of your French press may vary. Just play around with it. After a couple of tries, I'm sure you're going to become a master of it. And I love the French press. It's very nice way to brew coffee. It's very ecological. All the parts in it are reusable, so to say. There's no paper filter that you need to throw out or anything of that sort. So just take care of it. It is a way to brew coffee in a very delicious manner. And it is very fast considering the amount of coffee you can brew. You can brew 6 cups, 8 cups, 10 cups, depending on the size of the French press that you have, all in a single sitting. And all you have to do is follow these instructions. You can literally get a large batch of coffee for your family in just like 6 or 7 minutes, and it is delicious if you do it right. And that's it. It's as simple as that. I told you guys it was going to be very easy, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. If you do happen to brew on a French press, please comment down below. Tell me how it went. What I would recommend is try brewing French press, then rewatching this video and doing it with this method, and just compare and contrast. And that's the way you learn, with practice. Also, if you want to see any other brewing methods, please let me know, comment below. And also don't forget to check us out on social media. We're very active in TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, at Syzygy Coffee, of course here on YouTube, and on our website at syzygycoffee.com. We are running a promotion of 10% off if you use the code Space is Awesome. And good news for everyone in the United States, there is free shipping throughout the continental United States. That is for every single one of our orders, regardless of the size. So even if you have an order for a single bag, 10 bags, 20 bags, it is free shipping to you guys. Also improving the price of our subscription service. By the way, I would recommend checking out this video right here, and it'll teach you how to never run out of coffee at home. And with our subscription service, we are offering free shipping throughout every single order. And we have a bunch of coffee right now that we aren't going to be showing on our website. There are nano lots that we simply don't post online. They are exclusive to our Syzygy Coffee subscribers. So check it out. Now, if you like the content and this type of video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel. It helps out a lot. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.